الله الرحمن الرحيم والحمد لله رب العالمين اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على نبينا وحبيبنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين وبعد. يروي الشيخان فيما اتفقا عليه من حديث أبي هريرة رضي الله عنه أن النبي صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم ذكر يوم الجمعة فقال. The hadith tonight in the collection of both Bukhari and Muslim narrated to us by Abu Hurairah. And Abu Hurairah tells us that the Prophet ﷺ was talking about Jumaah, which is obviously the theme that we are addressing over the last couple of days and next week or so. We're talking about the significance of Jumaah, the etiquette of Jumaah, and the importance of kind of maybe observing the aspects of this day. It's an important part of our faith. It's a weekly event. It's not something that happens in Ramadan. We can afford not to talk about it until maybe a few weeks beforehand and then kind of go through an annual thing. But this is a weekly occurrence. This happens every week. So we should have full understanding of what's expected of us on the day of Jumaah in terms of our behaviors. Why it's important. What are we supposed to do to honor it and to benefit from it? So the Prophet ﷺ was talking about Jumaah. فقال فيها ساعة لا يوافقها عبد مسلم وهو قائم يصلي يسأل الله شيئا إلا أعطاه إياه. He said, ﷺ, that there's an hour, a time. The Sa'a is not really an hour, as in 60 minutes. It's more of just a period of time. That there's a time in Jummah that no Muslim person will align with that time, just achieve synchrony with that moment, in a state where they are establishing their connection with Allah. Qa'im yusalli does not necessarily mean that they're standing up praying. It just means that they are establishing a connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that could be many things, which I'll explain in a moment. Asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for something, except Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give it to them. قال ثم أشار بيده صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم يقللها. And then he started to go like this with his hand. This is one of the ahadith that are narrated both verbally and physically. Some of the hadith have a physical narration, meaning he did something alayhi salatu wasalam, so the narrator has to do what he did alayhi salatu wasalam. Those are my favorite hadith, and there's a collection of them. They're really nice because he did, and I'm going to do a series for you inshallah at some point in the future, where the hadith that have physical narrations. يقللها, meaning saying it's very, like this, it's small. It's not a prolonged period of time. It's a small moment. It's not very long. So if you can miss it really quickly and easily. So the scholars differed on what exactly is the time. And the scholars talked about a lot of different times. This is one of the issues where there's at least 15 different opinions from credible scholars on what the hour is. So I'm not going to share all 15 with you here today. That's too much time. But I'll tell you what I think it is. Because there's a hadith in the collection of Imam Muslim where alayhi salatu wasalam points out the time to be in between where the Imam is between the time of Dhuhr and when the Imam gets on the minbar. Meaning the little time between the Jum'ah time starting and the Imam getting on to give his khutbah. So it's around the time of Jumu'ah. Whether it's between the two khutbahs, before the first khutbah, right after the second khutbah, we're not sure, but it's around the time of Jumu'ah. Some scholars said it's the last hour of Asr before Maghrib. I don't think that's the case. I think there's a misconception. I think that's for something else. But for this time, it's most likely around the Jumu'ah time, because that's when you've established yourself in prayer. When you sit down to listen to a khutbah, that's praying. That's an act, you have to have wudu. That's an act of prayer, even though you're not standing up and praying, but you are actually in salah. That's why when the Imam is speaking, you shouldn't be saying a word, because you're in salah. You speak in salah, you invalidate your prayer. So you listen to the Imam. So the Prophet ﷺ points out that the hours around Jumu'ah, just before it, just after it, just between, are great times for you to be praising Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and making dua for yourself. Which is why between the two khutbahs, people usually, I sit and then people take a moment and they do istighfar and they make a quick dua, because that could be one of the times. And it's a really nice habit to get into, that every Jumu'ah, remember that there's a time during Jumu'ah where if you are lucky enough to be aligned with it during a moment of prayer where you're making dua, whatever you ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for, you'll be granted. Mind you, that whenever he says that alayhi salatu wasalam in a lot of hadith, he's usually referring to issues of akhirah. Just so that it's clear to people, because I feel like this is actually not a clear point. Whenever he points out, alayhi salatu wasalam, that there's a moment where you make a dua and you're accepted, a lot of the time what he's referring to, alayhi salatu wasalam, is dua that is regarding something of the hereafter, as in acceptance, or forgiveness, or high ranks, or closest to the Prophet, alayhi salatu wasalam, etc. Not a new car, or something like that. Like it's usually not specifically referring to that, even though Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one who grants you أَمَّنْ يُجِيبُ الْمُضْطَرَّ إِذَا دَعَاهُ وَيَكْشِفُ السُّوءَ. He will grant you what you're looking for. But usually when the Prophet ﷺ uses that terminology, he's talking about akhirah. So if you're someone who feels like the week is not going so well, you didn't do as much as you should have, you're not as close as you would like to be, then push yourself a little bit of Jumu'ah. Around Jumu'ah time, prepare yourself, and we'll go through the etiquettes, and make a lot of dua. And that's why people should be sitting in the masjid, should be making dua, because you never know when you actually get that one moment and you make dua and you ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant you itq from Jahannam, or grant you the highest ranks in Jannah, or to grant your parents full forgiveness, or to gather you with your loved ones on the gates of heaven. All these things that are really the stuff that really matter. The stuff that really matter, not this dunya stuff that has no significance. The stuff that matter on the day of judgment, you make that dua and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will grant it to you. And that's what he taught us, alayhi salatu wasalam. And he didn't tell us exactly when it was, so that just like you look for Laylatul Qadr, just like you look for that night out of those last 10 nights, you look for this hour on the day of Jumu'ah. Every week you have this hour where you can be granted everything you hope for if you're in the right position. So it's something to think about and to look forward to, inshallah ta'ala. يروي الإمام البخاري والإمام مسلم كل في صحيحه عن أبي هريرة أن النبي صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم ذكر يوم الجمعة فقال فيها ساعة لا يوافقها عبد مسلم وهو قائم يصلي يسأل الله شيئا إلا أعطاه الله إياه ثم أشار بيده صلى الله عليه وسلم يقللها. صدق رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله وصحبه وسلم. سبحانك والحمد لله لا إله إلا أنت استغفرك وإليك. وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه. جزاكم الله خيرا. بارك الله فيكم. السلام